Hi, hello, my name is Carrie and welcome to my channel. As you can tell by the title and the thumbnail of this video, today I am going to be speaking about Graceling, and that is by Kirstin Cashore. I would just like to start off this video that there will be spoilers in here. I tried to think of a way to explain all of my thoughts on this book without any spoilers, but it just didn't happen, so there will be spoilers. So if you have not read the book and you're thinking about doing it and you don't want it to be spoiled, I would just close out of this video right now. So Graceling follows a teenage girl called Katza, and she is the niece of one of the kings of the 7 kingdoms in the world that this takes place in. She is born into a world where people have these superpowers known as graces, and you can have a grace of anything. There could be a grace of swimming, who would be like a fantastic swimmer. There'd be a grace of fighting, a grace of baking, and they would just be incredible at these graces. So Katza is born, and you know that she has a grace because she was born with 2 different eye colours, and that's kind of how they are separated from other normal people in this world. So she is born with 2 different eye colours, and at a young age she discovers that she has the grace of killing. So she is hired by her uncle to kind of do a lot of the dirty deeds for him. If someone isn't paying him right or isn't respecting him right, she gets sent there to kind of teach them a lesson. And Katza kind of grows up with a lot of hatred, and she's everyone's scared of her basically, and nobody really wants to be her friend, so she's kind of brought up in quite an isolated world. She finds out that a father of one of the kings has been kidnapped, and she goes to kind of investigate that. I'm not going to speak too much about the main plot of it, I don't want to spoil absolutely everything, but basically she is on a big adventure and she has to travel across the different kingdoms to try and save everyone. So I'm going to start off with the pros of the book Graceling. As you can see by the cover, we've got, I'm assuming this is meant to be a depiction of Katza, and she is a strong, independent girl. She is a fighter. She is no damsel in distress. She protects herself, and not only herself, she can protect everyone around her. Because she has the grace of killing, she is a fantastic fighter. She can basically kill a man with her bare hands. She is really strong. She doesn't need anyone to look after, which I thought was such a good change, especially because I've been reading the Mortal Instrument books by Cassandra Clare, and it made me realise that a lot of girls in books, they start off as there's this trope where they start off as quite weak and vulnerable and they need protected, and then they slowly grow into being this powerful warrior. This doesn't happen in Graceling. She is born a powerful warrior, and she can protect herself right from the very start, which I thought was such a refreshing change in a YA book especially. It wasn't where she went from weakling to warrior, she was just born a fighter, and I thought that was fantastic. Another thing I really liked about this book is Katza sticks to her beliefs. So from the very beginning, Katza mentions that she doesn't want to get married, and she doesn't believe in marriage, and she doesn't like the idea of being owned by somebody in marriage. She kind of sees marriage as an ownership from one person, like your father, or in her case her uncle, to her now husband, and she doesn't like that idea at all. And she does get marriage proposals in this book, one from a good friend of hers, and she just turns it down, even though it would make her life probably a lot easier. I love the fact that even when she does fall in love later on in the book, she still doesn't get married, and I just love that she sticks to her guns about it. She still wants to be independent even though she is in love, and I think it's wonderful that she does actually stick to it. I think in a lot of books they have this trope of a character being anti-marriage, then they find the right person and then they get married, and it was refreshing again to see that that didn't happen in this book. I'm now going to move on to the cons of the book. Now this is a little bit longer than my pros. Although I did enjoy the book overall, I had some problems with the pacing of it. A lot of the book is spent with Katza kind of walking from one side of the world pretty much right to the other, and she does it through really dangerous terrain, and there's just a lot of walking. I feel as though about 90% of the book is spent following Katza kind of walking either with Poe or with the princess, and it's quite slow. It is honestly quite a slow book. Now, if you guys don't know what the Lord of the Rings are my favourite books, and I know there is a lot of walking in them, but there's also a lot of action, which really kind of separates the walking, but in this book there's no separation. There is just a lot of walking, and I found it a little bit boring sometimes. Now, to me, the love interest in this book seemed like a plan to kind of split up the walking. The way the love interest manifests itself in this book is Katza is kind of having a wash in like the stream, and she looks up and she sees Poe, and then she realizes straight away she is like in love with him. And it just seemed like a bit forced at that point. There was a little bit of like flirtiness between them before that, but it wasn't like anything major, and then she's all of a sudden, she's in love with him. And I just thought it was kind of a way to break up the walking, because now they could speak about their feelings, and they could, you know, all that sappy stuff that I really wasn't looking for in this book at all. As much as I did really enjoy the character of Poe, I did find the love interest a little bit forced, and I just didn't really enjoy that aspect of the book at all. One of the biggest problems I had with this book was the representation of disability in it. Now, I picked it up because of the Diversity Bingo Challenge, and one of the challenges was a sci-fi book that had a main character with a disability in it, and a lot of people had recommended Graceling for it, so I decided to read it. I will preface it here that this book was published in, I think, 2008, so by the time I've read this, the author has already put out a kind of statement about the portrayal of disability, and I think in her later books she's tried to rectify that. Now, I've not read the later books, so I can't say whether or not that's a better representation, but from what I've kind of heard, it does get a little bit better. So there's just a little like disclaimer there that the author has already spoke out about this, so clearly I'm not the first person to think that there was a problem with it. Basically, my problem with this book is Poe, who is one of the princes in the book, who ends up kind of going along with Katza on her journey. You think at the beginning he has the grace of fighting, because he is the one person who has kind of put up a challenge for Katza, and he's not easily defeated. You kind of find out later on that he's been a little bit deceptive, and his grace is actually like to sense other people, so he can sense their movements, he can sense their surroundings, like he can also sense what they think about him as well. So if I were to think I was going to punch Poe, Poe would know that I was thinking that, so he could like defend himself. Now, where this gets kind of complicated is later on in the book when Poe is trying to fight off the King's guardsmen. He is injured and he ends up going blind. Now, I would have loved to see Poe, you know, kind of overcome this disability without the use of his grace, but unfortunately that doesn't happen. Poe's grace, which we realise is to sense things, means that he can sense everything around him. He knows when there's a bird behind him, he can describe darkened cave looks, and it's pretty much like he's not blind at all. So I went into this book really excited to read about a character who had a disability in a sci-fi book, for it all to kind of happen quickly, and then for him to overcome it in about 30 pages, and then he realises that it's pretty much like he's not blind at all, because no one else around him seems to notice that he's blind, because he can still sense everything. It kind of just seems to fall into that trope that's in a lot of sci-fi or fantasy books, and that is that a disability can be like cured or lessened by magic or abilities, and it wasn't what I wanted from this book at all. I really wanted to see Poe overcome this without the use of a grace, and I just kind of felt a bit disheartened that that's what I got from it instead. Another problem I had with this book, it goes alongside the pacing, and that is, you think there's going to be this big standoff between Katza and one of the kings, and you know, you realise that he's a really, really bad man, and you're waiting for this big epic fight to happen, or at least I was waiting for this big epic fight, this big war basically, and it's over and done with. She gets there, she meets him, she kills him, it's done, and you're like, oh, like, you feel as though the whole book of her walking has just built up to nothing, absolutely nothing. It's all over and done with in the blink of an eye. I couldn't believe that it had happened so quickly. I didn't think it was possible for the climax to just be over just like that within the space of, I don't even think it was 2 pages. It wasn't any kind of big epicness that I was imagining. Like, she had been walking for about 90% of this book, so I was expecting some kind of big scene, and as I was getting nearer the end of the book, and I was like, there is not a lot of pages left for a big epic fight scene, and there wasn't. There was not. Next 30 or 40 pages after the kind of climax bit were all about the disability and the overcoming of it, so that happened really quickly as well, and I just overall just didn't enjoy the ending at all. I was just really disappointed. I really wanted something good to happen from this book. I kind of loved the idea of it. I loved the idea of Grace's and having these special abilities that weren't just like flying or like, you know, being really strong. It was the fact that all the people with Grace's had like individuality and they were so different and no one was alike, and I loved that. And I just think it was really anticlimactic and it wasn't what I wanted from this book at all. So unfortunately my reading of Graceling was a little bit disappointing, but I would love to know your thoughts on this book if you've read it. Just let me know. I would really love to hear other people's thoughts on this book to see if I'm alone in my thoughts on this. But thank you guys so much for listening to my ramblings. This has been my first proper review of like one book in particular, you know, going quite in depth. So I'm sorry if it was a little bit rambly and a little bit disjointed. I did try to kind of follow my notes, but I think I got a little bit carried away at some points. But if you enjoyed this video, please give me a big thumbs up, and if you would hit the subscribe button down below, that would make me incredibly thankful. And I will see you guys later for my next video. Bye!